Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Nick Tate. As part of the memorial's commemorations to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, this evening we commemorate the 80th anniversary of Japanese surrender at Cape Wom. After news that the Japanese emperor had ordered the surrender of his forces on the 15th of August, intelligence was received suggesting the Japanese garrison of Kiraru and Mushku Islands might be persuaded to surrender. 2 ships of the Royal Australian Navy circled the islands, flying white flags from their mastheads and using a captured Japanese prisoner to broadcast surrender messages. On the 17th of August 1945, a small group of Japanese ventured onto a beach carrying a white flag. Negotiations followed, and on the 10th of September, Rear Admiral Satoshiro boarded HMAS ML 805 and formally surrendered the naval forces under his command. 3 days later, a formal surrender ceremony was conducted at Cape Wom, near Wewak in New Guinea. Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi, commander of the Japanese 18th Army, signed a surrender document using the same wardroom table used during the earlier surrender. Following the ceremony, Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi handed his sword to Major General Robertson, and approximately 3,000 troops of the 6th Division marched in a ceremonial parade. Today, we pay our respects to the 40,000 Australian men and women who died as a result of their service during the Second World War, and who are commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we warmly welcome members of the Dissidents Motorcycle Club, an Australian veterans group who are currently undertaking a charity ride raising awareness for legacy. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and Australian Air Force cadets representing 310 City of Tamworth Squadron. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. For those who are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament. Flowers of the forest, wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Frank Walter Gage. Frank Gage was born on the 30th of April 1925 in the Adelaide suburb of Mile End, the fourth of 6 children born to John and Gladys Gage. Frank's father had served with the 1st Australian Imperial Force in the First World War with the 27th Battalion and later as a machine gunner. By the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, Frank Gage was single and working as a labourer in Adelaide. He enlisted in the Australian Military Forces on the 11th of August 1943, soon after turning 18. After time at the recruit depot and in training battalions, by the end of the year, Private Gage had marched out to join the 41st 2nd Battalion, a composite battalion consisting of the former 41st and the 2nd Battalion. The 41st 2nd was a militia unit of the Citizen Military Forces. Stationed at French's Forest in Sydney, the battalion was involved in manning defensive positions, training and labouring duties. Most notably, it participated in the search for escaped Japanese prisoners after the Cowra breakout in August 1944. Frank Gage, however, would not participate in this search, as he had absconded. Frank had gone absent without leave in June 1944, disappearing not for the usual few days, but for 4 months. Where he went and what he got up to is unknown, but he was apprehended at the end of October. A district court-martial held in Singleton in November found that, whilst he was not guilty of desertion, he was guilty of being absent without leave. He was sentenced to 6 months' detention and forfeited his pay for almost an entire year. He commenced his sentence at the 14th Australian Detention Barracks in Tamworth, but in February 1945, Frank's sentence was suspended. He rejoined the 41st 2nd Battalion, now located at Singleton. Within weeks, though, he was fined again for being absent without leave, this time for only 3 days. In May 1945, Frank was sent to the Training Centre for Jungle Warfare at Canberra in Queensland. After completing the course, he was allotted to the 2nd 7th Battalion and sailed from Brisbane on the 12th of July to join his new unit at Taipei. 3 weeks later, after 2 atomic bombs were dropped at the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan sued for peace. On the 15th of August 1945, the Emperor of Japan announced his nation's surrender. On the same day, a terrible accident occurred in New Guinea. At Karivu, a recently captured village some 24 kilometres inland from Wewak, Major Eric MacDonald of the 2nd 1st Australian Tank Attack Regiment thought he saw an enemy soldier in the undergrowth. He opened fire, scoring multiple hits and bringing the man down. But it wasn't a Japanese soldier, it was Private Frank Gage. Wounded in his chest, head, abdomen and arm, Frank was evacuated for medical attention, but soon died of his wounds. A court of inquiry found no misconduct or negligence on anyone's part, and that Major MacDonald had made a reasonable effort to identify the man he saw. Small parties of enemy troops were still at large in the area, likely unaware of Japan's surrender. Private Frank Gage was buried at the Karivu airstrip with Captain Patrick O'Keefe officiating the funeral service. Frank's comrades fired a salute over his grave. He was 20 years old. His remains were later reburied in Wewak War Cemetery before finally being reinterred at the Lae War Cemetery in New Guinea. Japan's formal surrender took place on the 2nd of September 1945 in Tokyo Bay. Over the following weeks, Japanese forces in various locations in the field surrendered to opposing Allied forces. On the 11th of September, Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi, commander of the Japanese 18th Army, arrived at Karivu, where Frank Gage had died less than a month ago. 2 days later, Adachi was flown to Wewak. That day, the 13th of September 1945, on the airstrip at the nearby Cape Wom, he signed the surrender of Japanese troops in New Guinea. He then handed over his sword to the commander of the 6th Australian Division, Major General Horace Robertson. Private Frank Gage is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among nearly 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Frank Walter Gage, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Party, shoulder,
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Party, breathe, Party, shoulder,
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Party, in words, terms. Party, wick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.